Hi friends, and welcome to my weekly live stream about the Uno platform. My name is Jérôme Lavant. I'm the CTO of the open source project Uno platform, and I'm spending about an hour or so talking about Uno and the news and live coding the Uno platform. So taking a look at issues and answering questions and anything that you may have that comes up during the stream or that has been raised during the past week or so. I've been pausing a bit for the summer, and last week there was the release of Visual Studio 17.3. So that means that there was no live stream, but it was for a good cause. So we're going to be talking about this this week a little bit at the beginning because there were a few things that changed. And I think we posted an update last week about this. So let's go through with this. But during this session or this stream today, we're going to be talking about a few issues, namely one that is about Xbind and typecasting. So we'll see if we can do something about it. Also, an error that may happen when using a flyout, and there's an error when generating some code. And then finally, if all goes well, we may end up, and that's ambitious. We may go through taking a look at the open videos button here, which is the resource localization of attached properties. So that's going to be interesting. It's definitely something that people are doing, especially with regards to tooltip. You can see here that's tooltips. So we're going to be taking a look at this depending on how well the others go. I see there are quite a few people already. Pascal and Andres. Guys. So let's go and take a look at the recent news. So last week there was 17.3 that was released, and you may have followed over the past month or year, that .NET 6 has been evolving and getting to a point where it starts to get useful and working properly. And one thing that you can do to get there is update to Visual Studio 17.3, and you have the ability to get to this issue. I think it's here. Support Visual Studio 17.3. And previously, there were a lot of stuff to do to get all of that running with the previews of Visual Studio. And that's the first release of Visual Studio that supports .NET 6 in stable, which is very good. So that means that you don't need to use any of the preview bits or if you were using Uno check with the -- pre that was needed before. So you need just to install Visual Studio, run Uno check, and you should be good to go. So we had a bit of fiddling to do with all the configuration files that are coming from Visual Studio. Same thing goes with the newest release of Visual Studio Preview 17.4, but that has changed, and it works properly now. So the only thing that you need to know, and especially if you've been developing an application for a while, is that when you install 17.3, or even if you upgrade from a previous version of Visual Studio, is that Xamarin is not installed by default, and that's a very important distinction with the previous versions of Visual Studio. And Microsoft changed the way Visual Studio installs. As you can see, I have 4 versions of Visual Studio installed on my machine, so because I'm testing all around. But if you go to the configuration options of Visual Studio 17.3, so this one is 4, but it's the same. And if you go to MAUI, then you will see that Xamarin here, and that's interesting. That one is not installed, so I'm probably going to be having to add that. Otherwise, I'm going to be having some trouble. Let's do this right away. Xamarin is not checked, and even if you had it installed in a previous version of Visual Studio that you had installed, it will not go over. It will just install on the MAUI and not Xamarin. So you may not be able to compile applications that use Xamarin iOS target frameworks and others. So let's see, MS build is still there. Looks like I'm probably going to be having to kill a few things. It's interesting that it's not going away. Okay, so let's do a bit of task kill. task kill. There you go. So let's try again. And so the side effect of this Visual Studio not installing Xamarin by default is the fact that hosted agents, so if you're building using Azure DevOps, that means that you're not going to get, and that's the current of today, and they're working on it to fix it. But as of today, the latest images for Azure DevOps hosted agents are not including Xamarin iOS nor Android. So that means that you can't build the Xamarin applications currently. So there's a few workarounds that are available, and those have been included into Uno already. So for Uno on itself, not necessarily for applications using it, but if you want to take a look at what's needed, you're going to be finding that into, I think it's that one. You will need to include, no, it's not that one. I'm missing it. Last items, there's that one. Probably this one. Yeah, that's probably that one. Okay. Was searching a bit too far, but the idea is that you have to add, and it's the same thing for GitHub Actions. You will need to add this PowerShell script, which will install the component Xamarin forcibly on the current installation of Visual Studio. So the it's a bit annoying because when you're running your CI currently, as of today, the agents are switching between 17.2 and 17.3, and if you have a code that relies on one or the other, then they may fail randomly. So that's not good. And on the issue here, if you go to that issue, you will see that they plan on updating the images that are on Azure DevOps on Monday. So that's quite far. I don't know, it's kind of critical, but it looks like with the workaround, it's good enough for some. But anyways, so that's the update for .NET 6 and Visual Studio 17.3. There are a few things that are there also, but that's for actually 17.4. There are a few things with projects not loading properly, but we'll kind of be testing this out as we go. On the other things that we talked about, there's the session that we did at .NET Conf for Maui, which was talking about, and we're done. There we go. So we have Visual Studio running the right content with Xamarin installed. So I did a session talking about Lottie, and so if you want to go take a look, if you can search for the sessions. So the additional sessions that were done for .NET Maui last week, and you will see Lottie and our integration into Uno in action. So there's that. So now let's jump into the error that we had here, which is a compiler error with name loading does not exist in current context for Flyout. So that's an interesting issue. And this one is something that we have been having issues with, and it's kind of because of the way it works. Let me move this, so for that specific issue, because a flyout is not an actual control, it's something that is not in the UI tree, or in some cases a bit different. So we're going to take a look at that. Some of the generated code does not account for that type when it's used at the root of a XAML file, and then it generates incorrect code. So let's go take a look at that issue. So I've extracted the repro because there's one that was created by the TTUST Stonic, and he was kind enough to provide that, so it makes it easier for us to validate what happens when we're tested in an issue. And we're going to be creating a separate app or separate test that we can include in Uno, so we can validate that it all works properly. So if you're joining, welcome. I see that McNets is back as well. welcome as well. So I believe that Mcnets, you were working on touch related features. So this is something that we're not talking about yet because it's in the next release. But we've been working a lot on frame buffer and Linux support to get a few kinks removed or flattened, and we're gonna get to some interesting issues. So I've been working for a few days on. I don't know if we're gonna be able to see it, but it's because it's a bit too far. But yeah, there you go. So it's a Raspberry Pi that I've been working on. That gives us some interesting things to be able to test touch and to test a few additional scenarios that we're not testing generally, and that's going to be quite interesting. So let's go into Visual Studio and let's see what we can get out of this Flyout test template. Well, actually, so yeah, all the things that you've seen, Magnets are, they're already most of those are already unstable. The last one is one change that we're adding that allows for application to exit properly when running with a frame buffer, but I'm not sure if you're running this. I believe you're running just a GTK shell, if I remember correctly. But if there are anything else, let us know. Okay, so we have the mobile head here, and we have the UWP head. So that's one of the things that people are creating, smaller samples, and makes it a bit difficult, a bit more difficult to test out what's happening with the generated code. So we're going to be adjusting a few things. So let's see, because when we're trying to build with additional targets, they may not build with the right set of properties. And see, so that's one of the issues that I've been having with the latest version of Visual Studio, is that when you select something here, it doesn't do anything. It stays there, and you can't select anything. It doesn't provide any target to debug with. So I'm not too sure if it's related to the use of it's not related to Uno, because if I go back to the stable version of Visual Studio, it doesn't cause any issue. So I tend to think it's because NuGet is not restoring properly for some reason, and it breaks the discovery of the fact that the project is mobile enabled. So the Android and iOS debuggers should be available, but that's not the case here. So we'll see if the build completes properly. So I'm building only for Net 6 Android, and it's still not there. So let's see if I unload the project and reload the project to see if we're actually trying to troubleshoot with you live to see if there's something that can help, but that doesn't look like it. No, it doesn't seem to help in any way, because it doesn't reload anything. So maybe actually been trying something with regards to features. So Visual Studio is adding a new set of options, and it looks like the projects need to catch up with it, and in that context it's not appearing. So let's see. I think I have 17.3 installed. Oh, there's a 0.1 already. What is this one doing? Okay, cumulative updates. Okay. I know there were a few things that needed to be fixed, but okay, let's see. We are going to be opening the application in 17.3 instead of 4. See if it's faring better. I would guess it does. So let's go to our Flyout Test and see if it loads better. I would guess it will. So please go away. Okay. So I have the mobile project here, and let's see if Visual Studio is working a bit better. I would assume it does. Yes, you can see here that it now allowed me to select the tablet, and which is good. That's what I expected. Yeah, so that's the annoying part. And you can see here that it only selects Net 6 Android, which is fine, but it should have been compiling everything up properly. So the test was about the settings flyout, and if there's a specific background set on the grid. So if I take this and I put it on the grid, the compilation will fail because it's missing something. So let's do compilation and see if that works properly, or if it repros, because sometimes the repros don't repro because of the updates of Uno or anything else. Okay, so we can see here that it actually does fail. It says the name loading does not exist in current context. So there's one thing that we can try to see if we can get the generated file, and sometimes it doesn't work. So we're gonna see if it can catch that up. Settings flyout, yes, it does work. So there was an update here that makes it work properly. So if we go to 111, it says nothing here. Interesting. So the line number is not the same one. Okay, so to debug this properly, we're going to be generating the files outside, and to do this we have a property that we can set, and this one is in here. So we go to the props file here, and there's a use Uno UI use Roslyn source generators, and we can take that one and put it in our project, and we're going to be having a new we're going to be having a new folder that's going to be generated. That's going to give us access to the generated file, so we can take a look at what Uno is generating and why it's wrong. So some reason it looks like the process is locked, so we can, let's do it again. Okay. So again, we have our file here, and now if we double click, we should be having something better. So in the obj folder, we should be having a G folder, but for some reason it's not picking up the user need. So that's the, actually should be false. That's my bad. So false forces the Uno to use a specific set of features that generate a G folder here. And we're going to see that there are going to be additional folders generated, and we're going to be able to take a look at the generated code better than we had with the other one. So this one is different. So that's another thing with 17.3. So if you see that message, it means that it needs to be updated, and it's something that we're changing as part of the latest version of Uno, and we're going to be updating to the latest of Uno so the build can work properly. And let's select all of it pretty much, except maybe Uno logging, the Microsoft logging. For the rest we can update. So it's fixed. It's an Uno source generation issue, and it only happens when you're disabling the Roslyn embedded features. So if you're setting it to false, then it uses the part of a part of Uno that's only enabled in that case. So that's why we need to make that update. So to troubleshoot the generators, it's easier to build it that way. So let's see if Visual Studio gives us a bit more information this time. It should. so that we should be having a more complex G folder. So it takes a bit more time, and that's one of the things that we changed because it used to take that long to build, and it's because we're spawning a another process behind, which takes a bit more time to start up. So there you go. Okay, so we're actually generating a block here for the loading that is not correct for the context. So we're in a flyout, and the flyout is nothing pretty much, but that's quite interesting. It's probably taking a look at a generated file that is not the right one. So we're gonna have to take a look at something else. I wonder if there's a way to go to definition but without going to the generated code, because it's taking us to the generated code, but it's not the right one. Interestingly, there's source link, so that's a good part. Well, that's pretty good. That's pretty good, because source link was not available previously, especially for Maui apps and or Maui based apps. So anything that depends on Net6. So that's pretty good. That's new. It was not there before. So we have a placement. So let's see if we do an F12 there. Oh, there you go. So we're in a flyout different flyout base. So flyout base is a dependency object, and it's not a framework element. So there's no loading of any kind that we can rely on to. So that's why that block here is not working properly. And one of the reasons why we're having to do this is that when you're setting setting a property here using a static resource, we need to resolve that brush here, which may be defined by a parent, and it needs to be reevaluating the static resource when the control is actually attached to its parent. So that's why we're hooking onto loading to be able to determine the right static resource in that context. But in this case, it doesn't work properly, so we're going to be having to adjust that. So we should be able to do some importing of that test inside of Uno and see how we can change it and make this work better. And my guess would be that the issue is actually present at any location. So if I set the background, if I set a second grid, maybe, let's say I put an inner grid here, I would guess that the issue will still be the same. So if I remove that here and I do that again, probably going to be having the same error, because it's still going to be generating the loading at the top because of the binding. There you go. So it's doing the same thing. So one of the things that we can take a look at is what the update resource is doing. And if we take a look at the update resource here, it's doing update resource binding on load, because we know that there's a static resource that's been set explicitly on the element, and we need to do an update resource binding to actually apply that to the element. So we're going to try to find a way to attach to the right element. Maybe we need to do something specific for flyout. I don't know. There are a few classes like that are put at top level that are not framework element, but that can be useful in that context. Flyout is one. I think there's content dialog as well that is doing the same thing. And it doesn't always work properly, so we're going to be see if we can change that behavior to make it work specifically for that case. No, there aren't that many, of course. So that's the better part of that specific issue. So what we're doing here is loading the solution using the cross-targeting override. And actually, I went a bit fast on that one. So if you're new to developing inside of Uno, to make sure that we're not loading the whole solution for all the targets that are existing. We're setting a cross targeting override props file that's derived from the props.sample. And what we're doing here is that we're saying to Visual Studio, don't load anything else but the Net461 target framework. And that one is actually the one that comes from that solution filter file here. And that's what I loaded up. So it's going to be filtering all the tests that we have, and they're all the projects that we have, and there are quite a few. It's loading up 23 project over almost 140 now. That makes for Visual Studio loading up faster. So let's go take a look at the flyout and see what we can do here. So let's say we do have flyout. So we do have a flyout test here. And we're testing a few things where we're setting a flyout directly here for the button. But I'm not too sure if we're testing the right thing here. So we're not testing flyouts differently. And in that case, we're testing something that is related to generated code. So in here, we're only testing controls that are part of that specific test suite. So we're going to have to add additional controls. So I'm going to be doing this from the file explorer, because in some cases, if you modify the code here, it doesn't work quite well. So I'm going to be changing this. So let's try to find, I think I had a few things available. So grid has some things. So let's pick up one there, and we're going to be renaming it. It's going to be easier because if you do right click here and try to add a control, it's going to take a while. They still haven't fixed that up. So if you add a control manually, it takes I don't know, 30 seconds to add the content because there are too many files in that project. So adding the files manually locally is good enough. So we're going to be flyout top, root element static resource. That's going to be the name of our control. And we need to be renaming a few things inside as well. And we're probably just going to be renaming, or I can probably take the sample that was there directly. So this is our flyout, and we can replace everything up in there. And the name for this still is not grid test. Because we're in flyout tests. And so we don't need the second grid. The first one is good enough. So we have a flyout with a grid inside. And we should be good with this. We're gonna flyout tests for that one. Okay, so in flyout, we need to add a new method. It's going to be when XAML and root static resource. And for this one, we need to be creating a flyout, so we can set it on the button. We can probably take a bigger app. This one is good. We get a host view. And we can take a few things here. So we have a flyout that's defined already. And I forgot something. So this is a flyout, and we need to change here. This is not a page, but a flyout. And the namespace is likely not the right one. Oh, there you go. It's the right one. And we should be good to go for this one. So instead of this flyout, we're going to be creating our own control instance. We don't need that much properties. And we can add the namespace that we created for this particular control. And we should be good. So let's try to compile this for now and see what we get. And it's likely that because we have the issue for the generation, it's going to fail during the compilation, which is what we want to have. So you remember that previously we had, if you've been following, we had a problem with the Uno storage generation running during the build for tests, and it was taking quite a bit of time. Now it's not the case anymore. Everything's running up inside of the VBCS compiler. So I think we have CSC running somewhere in there. So it's bigger, but it goes faster, a lot faster to build. That's very nice. It's not available for all targets. So if you're developing, for instance, for Net Standard 2 or for iOS or others, it's not necessarily using the new set of the new Roslyn hosted generators. So it's something that we're going to be having to adjust. But there are a few things that quite don't work out yet, but that will happen soon. Okay, so we're saying here that the namespace Flyout Test already contains a definition for controls. That may be. What do we have here? So I'm interested. It says that the generation is not having the right namespace. So what did we do? Okay, that's right. We have to have an actual name here. So we need to put this at the top. So we have to put the actual class name, because when you do an X class, you have the namespace plus the class name, and I just put controls at the end. So it was creating a class name control, which is not what we wanted. Okay, so that's interesting because it built. It built and it's not supposed to have been. So that means that we have something that changed that is different from the sample app that we have. So let's see if we have something different here in the generators, maybe. Do we have the file that is generated? So we're searching for what is called flyout, flyout root element static something. There you go. And we don't have anything in there at all. So that means that it says warning, controls does not specify it. Define a flyout because the flyout is not okay. So that's not the right type. Maybe we're not having. What's missing there? So we have the right type here. We have the right content here. The name is the right one. So did I miss something? May look like we did. Let's try to do a build, an actually updated build here. No, it's still building. Okay, so we have another problem. So maybe we can do the same thing that we did on the other target, which is changing the generators to see if we can get the generators to do something different just for that specific project and not the whole suite of projects. So it's going to take a little bit more time to build because it needs to start up the Uno source generation tasks, but now it's just for debugging, and then we're going to be removing that property and see if we get something that is different. So if it does not happen, that means that we're not doing the same. We're not having this exact same environment. So we're gonna have to find out which one that is. So let's go find again. So we have the G folder like we had yesterday before in the other sample. So we got the XAML code generator. XAML code generator generated file. Then we can go take a look at the generated content that we have here. And interestingly, we have the pink brush. but it's not doing the same. It's not doing the same issue here. So I wonder what may be different that could cause this to behave and generate the different code. So maybe it's because there's a style with a color palette that could have, let's say, a pink, a pink brush, something that exists, and that could make everything go differently. So that could be. So let's say we remove. So we have a few pink color brush things that are available. Maybe if I remove this, so let's say I remove that pink color brush here. And I build again. Do I have the same error? So again, it's using the whole suite, but it's still generating the same loading method that's not supposed to be here. Okay, so what's different between the two? So we have the pink brush that's there. Let's say if I use something else, if I use to be French. So Toto is something that French people do use, but they don't know a name to put. So it's still the same thing. So it's not related to the name here. The placement is the same. The file name is the same. That is very odd. So maybe it's related to the fact that it's iOS, maybe. Or Android in that case. So maybe there's something specific to Android that causes this. So we can search for the code that is generated and see if we have something that looks like it. So let's go for the generator inside of Uno and see if we can find something related. So we have loading delegate. If it's a framework element and it has binding expression or has a resource extension. So an interesting thing is that it says if it's a framework element. So what's the name that's used in Quebec? Patate or poutine, maybe? I don't know. I know Carl uses patate a lot. You can't repeat. Okay. So it's not. It's supposed to be a framework element. So if it's not a so we know that Flyout is not a framework element. So it's not supposed to be this. So is there, maybe there's another. So it's not this. Okay. So that is quite interesting because it means that for some reason, and in some cases only, that block of code is executed where it shouldn't. And I can see that there's a if it's that particular piece of code, there should be a semicolon that's added at the end that's actually not doing anything, and we can see if it's exactly that piece of code. So there you go. It's added at the end, so we can see that you have the loading delegate and we have an append write line. So it actually is that one. So for that specific part to happen, it means that is framework element is true. And so that means that either class name or control base type, for some reason, is of type control or class or framework element. So let's see. Maybe there's something inside of the app that makes it fail. So this is Flyout. So this is Windows Control Flyout. It's not a this one is a settings Flyout. That's very interesting. It's very, very interesting. So we're on mobile. This is a This is an Uno UI app. This is interesting. So that makes it easier to debug. So let's go and override this and take a look at what that is. I'm not sure. So this is very odd because it would mean that in that specific case, we're writing. We're expecting that the type that we're writing for is a framework element, but definitely it is not. So there's something fishy that's happening here that makes that block being executed where it shouldn't. So let's go figure this one out. So now what we need to do, and we want to be able to debug on the other app because we're not able to reproduce inside of Uno. So what we're going to do is change the cross-targeting file to set the second part, which is the Uno target override version here, to set it to 4.5 dev 523. And what we're going to do is just rebuild the generators. And we're going to be able to go inside and put a breakpoint and see what's happening. So if we take a look at the documentation, we're going to be able to find a piece of code that tells what to do. So to be able to troubleshoot generators. And there's a property that you can set that allows to break here, debugging the XAML source generator. So you can take that code and put it inside your application. So now you can see that when once I've built, the overriding NuGet cache says that it went and place some file in the NuGet cache directly, and it changes the generator so that you can actually troubleshoot inside of a running app. So I'm gonna go back to the application here, change the generator break, and we're going to be placing a breakpoint directly into the generator at the right location. So we're talking about 1000 here. And let's go and put a breakpoint inside of the if, because we know we're getting into that part. So let's see. Okay, so we can see that we're now breaking on some breakpoints. So we can open Visual Studio that has our Uno target open already. And now that we're there, actually I opened the wrong location. I opened the file in the other Visual Studio, and that's not what I wanted. Actually, we're debugging in the original Visual Studio, which makes it easier because we have the symbols and everything else. So let's put a breakpoint here. And do we break? We do. Okay, so we're getting to a point where we have this framework element that is true. And what we want to determine is what is the type. And it says that the type is page. That is very interesting. So in which file are we? We are in the file that is named. So that's the name. I don't know. So let's go take a look at the locals because I don't remember the type. So there's a specific property that says in which file we are. And it takes a while to load. So we're in main page. So main page is fine. Main page is fine. That's the right one. It's supposed to be hitting that specific location. Now, if we're in the other file, flyout, so we should be in flyout. So we're loading again, so that's not the right one. Main page. Oh, we're in main page. Shell control. So shell control is supposed to be having that block as well. And it's done. Okay, so did it build? No. Okay, so it says loading still does not exist, but we didn't go into the breakpoint that we were supposed to be hitting. So let's try again. We're supposed to be in settings flyout. So when we're in main page here, settings flyout. There we go. Okay, so I probably missed the original one. Okay, so it says is framework element, and class name is settings flyout. The control base type is flyout, and still says that it's a framework element. So that is very interesting. And it's troubling. So maybe because the class name is just settings flyout, it matches another control that is actually called settings flyout that is part of Visual, that is part of Uno. And that may be the reason why it fails. So let's see. Because settings flyout is actually a type that exists inside of Uno, and it's probably matching the other one. That's why inside of Uno it doesn't fail the same way. So let's see in Uno here. Do we have a settings flyout? There is a settings flyout, and you can see that. Oh, there. Jeez. I should have pressed enter. Would have been easier. It actually is a content control, so that's why it fails. Okay, so the fix is actually quite interesting, and it's something that's related to a set of changes that I made recently, but I've probably missed that one. Is the fact that we're searching for a type, a loosely typed name, and that's not good. We're supposed to be using an actual class name that's actually longer than that, and we can find that in here that we have a class name that's defined here. That's not the right invocations. I think we have a property that says the full symbol here. And we can use the symbol directly and not do any kind of string manipulation. So let's go and use that instead. Because we already have resolved the type completely. So there's no need to do anything about it. We can just take the name, the name type symbol completely. So in there, so there's only one thing, is that in some cases, if the class name has not been resolved, which may happen in some cases, we may be having some trouble. So we're going to try it. We'll see what happens. So we have class name here. Or we probably use the full name. I think we do have the full name. Because the reason I'm saying this is that in some cases, when we're getting to a point where we're resolving the type name, and that's something that's related to another issue that we have that's very similar, is the fact that you can write a XAML file, and that XAML file will not have a fully declared counterpart in C#. So for instance, if you're getting a settings flyout and you do this, then, well, if you keep the braces, that means that as far as the Roslyn compiler is concerned, that file, that type is an object. It's not a flyout. But the thing is that there's a file that is generated. So there's a file that's supposed to be generated for the compilation using the XAML, and we're not having that file as a result because of this. So it's something that we may have to change at some point. You know, to generate those files ahead of time for the generators. So we need to analyze the files and do something about it, because we can't add types to the compiler itself when we're inside a generator, or at least not in a way that Roslyn allows for it, publicly at least. And we need to handle that properly. So if you're writing it that way, then there may be things that don't work properly, or the type has not been resolved properly, or you can just not write it at all, and then there may be issues. So we're going to be seeing if we can do something about it. But let's say, for the sake of the argument, that we have a class name and it's supposed to be the right one and it works properly, and we're going to be saying here, we're going to actually make some failure at that point. So if class name is null, then let's throw invalid operation for now, being Actually, this is not good because we're doing something incorrect. We could probably just not pass the symbol completely and use the X class name instead. So we can remove class name here or make it a variable. And we can use class name symbol instead. So if it's null, we can say that the class, I think there's a full name property that's available somewhere. There's namespace, class name. I thought I added the whole thing, so probably not. So it's namespace dot class name at the top. Okay, so we're saying that if we're not finding the class name here, then we have a problem. And then we're saying here that we're dereferencing something that's not right. Okay, so we're expecting that X class name symbol is not null. And then we can use class name completely. So we can probably change this to be the symbol completely instead of using that indirectly. So it uses a string. Okay, so we probably gonna have to do, so the class name is good for this one. We have a control base type as well. That's that is available already. Okay. So the class name may be null as well, so we need to check for that, but it's not good as well. So we have the name here, and then we're getting bindings for type name. But we need the bindings interface name. We need the full class name. So what do I need the full name? The class name. Okay, so we need the actual class name, not the full type name. So for this one, it's going to be just class name. And it's a dot. Okay. Do we have something that works? Yeah, it looks like it. Okay, so if we're here. Okay, so it builds, and we go back to the other one. Let's remove the two properties that we had here that makes the compilation too slow. Don't need to debug again. Let's see if it works. So the bug is actually the fact that the Uno developer actually used a type name that matches something that comes from Uno. That breaks the type resolution. So there you go. So that works properly now. So because we're resolving the actual the right type, and that we're not generating the loading again. So when the build finishes, I think we're going to be able to see the generated code and why there isn't anything that will be generated in that location. So in the settings flyout, there will not be the loading, but that part, I don't know how that works. I mean, it's supposed to be regenerated every time, but for some reason that specific node, it does not get regenerated. I don't know how. There's no refresh or any kind that's available here. So if there's someone from Microsoft that's watching at some point, this is not particularly useful because I modified the generator. So unless Visual Studio is using another version of the generator, maybe. So let's see. So maybe there's some caching that happens. So if I reload the app, maybe we can see if the generated file is actually getting the right content. Let's see. And the source generator. So it's still doing something here. Okay, so it generated the file, and what do we have in settings? Flyout again. No, loading is still here. So I don't know. I don't know what the generator is loading because this is not compiling because we made the modification for it, but it's still generating the wrong code, but in that node specifically. So my guess would be that they have some kind of a cache somewhere. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. So I let's try that. And I think it's somewhere in the app data. So we can actually try to figure that one out. Let's see. Let's go for a bin and obj. And see if that gets better. Maybe it's related to the NuGet cache. Maybe when they're re-resolving everything, it gets a different hash or something. It's actually something that we can find. We can actually find the location of that file using the debug feature that I shown you. So let's go take a look at that one. It will end the stream pretty nicely. So let's do this. So if I go back here, and I let it. The project no longer exists. Interesting. Okay. So I have an analyzer, a set of, there's a lot of checks, but anyways. Okay, so let's let it generate. So this generator is not generating anything. Okay. Okay, so now it's getting better. Okay, so let's do an actual build and see the generator will generate something. Oh, there you go. Oh, okay. So closing and reopening did something, and we still have the loading. Okay, so that means that we're still loading that that one from somewhere that shouldn't be. The thing is that I think the generator will only kick the debugging if it's not part of that the dev env or not a design time package. So it may be rebuild and pray. There you go. So let's see where that one comes from. Where maybe we're gonna be seeing something differently. So this one is loaded from call stack modules. There you go. And we're talking about this file, which is the Uno source generator, and it's the one that is loaded directly from source generator. So that's not the one that's loaded up. So oh yeah, so that's something that we can do. So because it's Visual Studio, and they haven't, for some reason they haven't moved the source generation part out of Visual Studio. So the IDE itself for now is still running the generator. So some reason feels wrong to me, but it's probably a very good legacy reason for that. Let's go and find our dev. So if it wants to. Okay, so we want to attach to Flyout Test. So let's go and figure out where the cache is. So we've attached to Visual Studio, the other one. And what we want to find is where the cached file is. So we go to module. It is probably going to be an Uno file loaded up. If it's not, it may be because it's loaded in a different process. So maybe they've moved it out. So that could be the case. So let's see. I think there's another process. It's called Roslyn something. We're going to be attaching to that one. Okay, so let's. Oh, I loaded Uno for some reason. So we want Roslyn something. This dialog has been slower by every version of Visual Studio. I don't know why they're taking that much time to show the list. It used to be pretty fast, but yeah, now it's quite slow. Okay, so we have Roslyn Service Hub. So I don't know which one that will be. So my guess is that because we're running the full Visual Studio, so that will be the default path. It's probably going to be that one. And let's see if we have some Uno stuff there. It doesn't get unloaded. No. Maybe it gets unloaded. Oh, there it is. Okay, there you go. Ah, there you go. So there's the cache, and it's in temp VS Analyzer assembly loader. What's in that? What's in that location? A lot of stuff. So there's system text source generation, the UNO analyzers, net analyzers. Okay, so they're shadow copying all the assemblies that are there, causing the generators to fail. So just so you know, if you're developing generators, you will probably hit that specific issue, and they're shadowing all the assemblies that you're putting. So if you're making changes, the compiler will pick them up if you do an actual build. But for design time build, they're loaded up in a different assembly or in a different process, and they're using a different technique to load the assembly. So even if you change it and the compilation will work fine, the resulting generated code from this particular part of the IDE will not give you the right results. Okay, so we have something interesting here. So we have a fix for the flyout issue, which actually was not a flyout related issue because it was already working properly. So that means that the fix is actually quite easy to place. So probably going to figure out, let's take a few minutes to see if there are other locations where we're doing this kind of lookups that are not supposed to be there. Let's see. I thought I picked them all up, but that's definitely not the case. Okay, so we had if we take a look at the change here, and that's the thing, is that the reason it doesn't fail inside of UNO is that is related to the way we do fuzzy matching with type names. And depending on the process and how types are loaded, the order is different. So the first type that is matched is not the right one. So we're moving away from that fuzzy matching that we're doing inside of UNO, but it's still there, and in some cases it breaks. So that one is one that comes up. So if we search for, let's say, we changed the original call that was here. So if we search for, let's see. Oh, that's interesting. I was looking for this type, so it would be on the other side. So we want to be able to find all the uses of X class name. So what do we have here? So we're using it for inconsistent type names. We're using it for the scoping at the top, but that one is a composition. So we're composing namespace and class name, which is fine. We're not doing any kind of lookups there. We're doing that with compile bindings. That one is probably causing some issues. Okay, so with this one, we're doing some parsing, I would guess. Okay, so that class name is the right one. We're using the class name here, and we're not fully qualifying it. So if there are clashes there, that may be causing some issues. So we're not fully qualifying with the global namespace, the type name. So that may be an issue. I think we had a contributor add something that would allow types to have the fully qualified name with the global in front. I don't remember if we had that merged in. I don't think we do, because we're having get globalized type name. We have a trick that does this, but it's not the complete one. But still, you have a globalized type name instead, so that would be something that we can change. So this one may be a problem in multiple locations because we're using names like this. and it's not fully qualified. So that's a problem. So not qualified as well here. Oh, it's not too many. We have a few others that are here. Yeah, it's not, it looks like it's the last ones. Because the other ones are quite different. So we're using symbol in most locations. Okay, so that would explain. So we can probably do the same type of change to make sure that we're using the fully qualified name and not just parts of it, like we were doing before. So let's change the other one that we had here. So compile bindings here. Probably just remove that class name here because we can use the top level name. So we have the class name here. So it said it's X class name. So we really needed the type name. So we can do, we have a method that's an ensure class name, and that one is interesting because it has a member not null. So it ensures that in the output of that method, the X class name is actually available. So that's the first one. And then we have the fully qualified name that needs to be specified here. So we can do get globalized type name. So I think this needs to be changed because it's not completely right. But let's do type symbol to display string. You can probably make it a globalized version of it. Yep, let's do that. Globalized class name. And let's go for this here. So it says symbol may be null, which may happen, but in that case, we actually need the type to be available. So probably should fail as well if the symbol is not available. So let's see here. It's null. Probably gonna have to make the same, because we made the changes before in the other location where we're verifying that the type was the right one or was available. Could probably do the same. See, we have that same validation here that said that symbol is not the right one. So yeah, nullability is not always easy to work with because you have inner types that may be different. So you probably return the symbol instead of getting it. Yeah, it's probably best to do this. Symbol, we're using symbol here. So let's do a method instead. I'm gonna get X class symbol and do it's just plain validation for the fact that we don't have access to the symbol here, but you know, it makes it easier. Return X class name symbol. It's not null, so we're getting everything, so that's good. And we can do the same at the other location where we had the X class symbol, and then we can do globalized class name out of it. And we can use that X class symbol in the menu locations where we use that name. So those are actual types that need to be fully qualified, and not just the type name, because it may clash with other types that have the exact same. Looks like I need another validation here. Enter X class. So we need to have an X class, and then we need to have the X class symbol that it's available here. Okay. There. Okay, so that should be enough. There we go. Okay, so we've validated all of this. So the only thing, and that's the not so obvious part, is that we can't really unit test that part, because it's based on the fact that the type resolution is behaving differently depending on the process you're running in. So the only thing that we can validate is that we're not breaking anything, and that we have a lot of tests that go along that route. So I'm gonna keep that test that does the flyout validation here. It doesn't break anything. It's just we're saying that we have a flyout that's called well, actually the name is not the right one. So if we were to call it we could actually call it the same type name, because we changed the type, and that's the idea. So let's call it exactly the same thing, and we're gonna keep the test as is. And we're calling it settings flyout, and keep it there, unless it breaks at some point. So that's it's kind of a simple regression testing that we can get as a validation for the future if we end up changing some of the code that's used in that location for the source generator. So there you go. You can see here that it's actually ambiguous, which is interesting. So I could probably do settings flyout like this. There you go. So that's it for today. I thought it would have been faster, but it's actually a very it's an issue that's definitely not what I thought it was. So next week is probably going to be of the two issues that we mentioned at the beginning, which is the resource stuff and some Xbind casting that we haven't taken a look at. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the stream, and I'll see you next week. Until then, happy coding. Bye for now.